The city was alive with its usual noise and rush. But inside the small community center, tucked between tall gray buildings, it felt different, quiet, warm, and strangely peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the big windows, casting long, soft shadows on the floor. Children's laughter echoed in the hallways, and the faint smell of crayons and paper lingered in the air. This place wasn't much, but it was safe. It was a tiny island in a world that often felt too harsh for kids like her. A little girl sat in a corner near the art table, her legs crossed and a piece of paper in front of her. She held a crayon tightly, her small fingers smeared with different colors. She was concentrating hard, her tongue poking slightly out of the corner of her mouth. On the paper, she had drawn a figure of a woman smiling, with long arms stretched wide. Above it, she had written in her own uneven handwriting, "My mom, for one day." She stared at it, biting her lip, her eyes soft but distant. No one had noticed her yet. She liked it that way. Being quiet meant she could imagine things she usually didn't get to have. In her imagination, the woman on the paper could hold her hand, brush her hair, and tuck her in at night. She could laugh with her, tell stories, and never leave. Just for one day. That was all she wanted. The door to the center opened, letting in a rush of cold wind. A tall man walked in, wearing a dark coat, and his presence seemed to fill the room without him saying a word. People turned to look, curious, because he didn't look like someone who usually came here. He moved with confidence, almost like he owned every step he took, but his eyes were different. They were calm, observant, and somehow lonely. He wasn't here for attention or charity. He was here for something else. Though even he didn't know exactly what that was. He walked slowly through the room, noticing the children playing, the staff guiding them, the paintings on the walls. His gaze fell on the little girl in the corner, her attention fully on her drawing. Something about her stillness caught him. He stopped a few feet away, watching quietly. The way she held her crayon, the way she tilted her head. It was like she was talking to the paper, pouring out her feelings without words. For a moment, he thought about leaving, not wanting to intrude. But something inside him made him stay. Maybe it was the way she looked, so small and delicate, yet so strong in her own quiet way. Maybe it was the words on the paper. He leaned slightly closer, careful not to startle her, and asked in a soft voice, "What are you drawing?" The girl looked up, startled. No one had asked her anything like that before. Most adults just glanced at her or ignored her. Her eyes were large and brown, filled with a mix of curiosity and caution. After a pause, she said, barely above a whisper, I'm drawing a mom. Just for one day." The man's heart tightened unexpectedly. "A mom? What do you mean?" he asked gently, kneeling a little so he could see the drawing better. She stared at him, unsure if she should answer. Her lips quivered, but finally she said, "I don't have one. Not really. I just want a mom for one day. Someone who won't leave." Her voice was small, but heavy with longing, the kind of longing that can make grown-ups. It's uncomfortable because it's so pure and honest. He didn't know what to say at first. The words hung in the air, and the sound of them made the room feel quieter. Even the laughter seemed to fade. He could see how much she meant it. She wasn't asking for toys or candy or even a fun trip. She just wanted to feel what it was like to be cared for, to be held, to be safe. And that simple wish struck him in a way he hadn't expected. "I see," he said finally, his voice low, thoughtful. "Would you like to tell me more about her?" She hesitated, looking at the drawing, and then slowly she began to describe the woman in her picture. The woman had kind eyes, long hair that shined like the sun, and a smile that made her feel warm inside. She could make pancakes and braid hair and listen to stories for hours. The man listened, captivated by the details. Every word she said made the longing in her eyes more real, more painful, but also more beautiful. A staff member walked past, giving him a polite nod. "Hello," she said. "Can I help you?" "No, thank you," he replied. He wasn't here for help. He was here because he couldn't leave. Something about the girl made him stay. He sat in the chair across from her, not saying much, just listening. She talked about how sometimes she pretended her foster parents were like the mom she wanted, but it never lasted. They always went away, or she had to move to another home. The sadness in her voice was quiet but deep. He wanted to reach across the table and hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but he didn't know if that was his place. He had never done this before, cared for someone like this, not for business or duty, but for someone's heart. You know, he said finally, sometimes adults forget what kids really need. They forget that love isn't just words. It's being there, being patient, being someone you can trust. She looked at him, wide-eyed, as if she had never heard anything like that before. Then, after a long pause, she asked, Would you be my mom for one day? He blinked, caught off guard. The words were innocent but heavy. He wanted to laugh, to shake his head, to say it was impossible, but something inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, he could try. He had never been anyone's family, never really had someone who depended on him for love. But here was a chance, small and fragile, to make a difference in someone's life. Could he do it? Did he even know how? I think I can try, he said carefully. But we'll need to figure out what being a mom for a day means. Do you think you can teach me? Her face lit up, a small, cautious smile breaking through her sadness. Really? You'd try? Yes, he said. I'll try. For the first time that day, she seemed to relax. She put down her crayon and looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. They talked about what the day might look like. She wanted to do small things, make breakfast, read a story, go to the park. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just simple things that made a child feel loved. The man left the community center that day feeling different. He walked through the busy streets, the noise of the city surrounding him, but inside it was quiet. Her words echoed in his mind, not as a burden, but as a call to something he hadn't known he was missing. He thought about the little girl who wanted a mom for one day and wondered how he could help her, what it meant to really care for someone else, and whether he could open his heart enough to be part of her world, even just for a short while, and somewhere. In the corner of that small, bright room, a little girl drew her dream of a mom, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in a long time, unaware that the man who had listened so closely would soon change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. After leaving the community center, the man couldn't stop thinking about the little girl. Her words, so small, yet so powerful, replayed in his mind over and over. He had never expected to feel this way about anyone he didn't already know. He walked through the crowded streets, the city buzzing around him, yet inside there was an unusual quiet. It was as if her voice had carved out a small space in his thoughts, a space that was suddenly filled with warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. He went home to his apartment, a place that was impeccably clean, elegant, and completely empty. Every piece of furniture had a purpose. Every decoration was carefully chosen, yet there was no life in it. No laughter, no mess, no little shoes lying around the living room, no drawings stuck to the fridge. He realized how lonely it felt, how hollow a space could be without someone who needed you in it. That little girl's wish had opened a door he didn't know was locked. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the city. He thought about her drawing, the woman with long arms reaching out, the words she had written, "My mom for one day." He remembered the way her eyes had looked, the mixture of hope and fear, and he felt something unfamiliar and urgent desire to do something good, to matter in a way that wasn't about money or power. The next day, he returned to the community center. This time, he didn't go in quietly. He asked to speak with the staff, explaining that he wanted to know more about the little girl. The staff were polite but cautious. He was, after all, a stranger, but they saw something genuine in his eyes, something that made them believe he wasn't just curious for the sake of curiosity. He learned that she had been in multiple foster homes, that she often felt alone, that she was quiet but incredibly imaginative. Each piece of information made his heart ache. He asked if it was possible to spend time with her outside of the center. The staff exchanged glances, unsure if this was appropriate. He assured them he only wanted to give her an experience she had been dreaming about, nothing more. After some hesitation, they agreed to let him take her on a supervised outing, and arrangements were made. He felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He He wasn't used to interacting with children in this way. He had been good at business, negotiations, and strategy, but he had never been anyone's caregiver. He didn't even know where to start. When he arrived to pick her up, she was waiting at the art table, looking up curiously. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and for a moment he wondered if she was afraid. But she smiled, a small, careful smile, and said, "You came back." "Yes," he said, kneeling so he was closer to her height. "I'm back. Are you ready for our day?" Her excitement was quiet but genuine. They walked together to a nearby park, the city streets bustling around them. Yet in the small bubble of their time, it felt as if the world had slowed down. They talked about small things, what she liked to draw, her favorite colors, the games she enjoyed. He listened more than he spoke, learning about her world. And gradually, he felt the walls around his heart beginning to soften. At the park, they played on the swings. And for the first time in years, he laughed freely. He pushed her gently, feeling her laughter ring in the air. She was careful not to laugh too loudly, as if she didn't want to attract attention. But the joy in her eyes was unmistakable. He realized that these small moments, these tiny experiences, were shaping something inside him. He wasn't just giving her a day. She was giving him a glimpse into life he had long ignored after the park. They walked to a small cafe that was known for its homemade pastries. She chose a chocolate croissant and a glass of milk, and he ordered coffee, though he barely touched it. He watched her eat, noticing how she savored each bite. She told him stories about her drawings, the characters she created, and the worlds she imagined. He asked questions, genuinely interested, and she beamed at him, delighted that someone was listening with full attention. During their conversation, she shared more about her foster homes, the constant moving, the temporary nature of her life. Her words were calm but carried an invisible weight, a sadness that she had learned to carry alone. He felt a lump in his throat, realizing the depth of her loneliness. He wanted to tell her that it was okay to be sad, that it wasn't her fault, but he wasn't sure how. Instead, he held her hand gently across the table, hoping she could feel that someone truly cared. The afternoon continued with small adventures, visiting a library, picking out a storybook together, sitting on a bench and reading it aloud. He had never imagined that reading could feel so intimate, so bonding. She leaned against him as he read, her small hand in his, and he felt a protective instinct awaken inside him. He wanted to shield her from the world, to make her feel safe and cherished. As the sun began to dip behind the buildings, casting a golden glow over the city, they walked back to the community center. He could see the change in her, a subtle brightness, a lift in her posture. For the first time in a long while, she had experienced a sense of stability, even if it was just for a few hours. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a realization that sometimes the smallest gestures could leave the largest impact. Back at the center, the staff thanked him for spending the day with her. The little girl turned to him, hugging him briefly, a gesture filled with trust and hope. He felt the warmth of that hug linger longer than expected. It wasn't a hug of obligation. It was a hug of connection. And in that moment, he understood that he had begun to change, that he was starting to care in a way that had nothing to do with business, money, or status. He left the center with a strange mix of emotions. Pride, because he had been able to make her happy for a day. Fear, because he knew he wanted more than a day, but he didn't know if that was possible. Hope, because he realized that sometimes opening your heart could bring unexpected joy. And determination, because he didn't want to stop here. He wanted to be a part of her life, to be someone she could count on, someone who wouldn't leave. That night, he sat in his empty apartment, thinking about the day. He replayed every laugh, every story, every small smile she had given him. He realized that in seeking to give her a day of love, he had received something equally precious in return, a glimpse into the simple, honest beauty of human connection. He understood that life wasn't only about achievements or wealth. It was about moments like these, moments that made hearts feel full and souls feel seen. As he drifted off to sleep, he made a silent promise to himself and to her. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would find a way to be there for her. 2. Give her the care and attention she deserved. She had trusted him with a piece of her heart, and he wasn't about to let that trust go. For the first time in a long time, he felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with success and everything to do with something far more human: love, in its simplest and most genuine form. The next morning, he woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. It was a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, a fluttering he hadn't felt in years. He got ready carefully, choosing clothes that were casual but neat, wanting to show her that he cared, that today was special. He thought about what she had said, how she wanted a mom for just one day. Someone who could listen, who could care, who could be there for her without rushing. He didn't know exactly how to do that, but he knew he wanted to try. When he arrived at the community center, she was already waiting, her small backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked up and smiled, a tentative but hopeful expression on her face. When she saw him, her eyes lit up like tiny sparks of joy. He knelt down to meet her at eye level, feeling a lump form in his throat at the sight. "Ready for today?" he asked, trying to sound casual though his voice betrayed him. She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I've been waiting for this," she said. She took his hand, her fingers small and warm, and together they walked out of the center, leaving behind the sounds of other children and the faint smell of crayons and paper. Outside, the city was bright with morning light, and though the streets were busy, it felt like they had stepped into a world that existed just for them. He wanted to make the day meaningful for her, not filled with expensive toys or flashy experiences, but with simple moments that could make her feel loved. They started with breakfast at a small cafe she had never visited before. She chose a plate of pancakes with syrup, her eyes widening as she smelled them. She talked excitedly about her favorite foods, what she liked to eat, and the little rituals she had in her previous homes. He listened, asking questions, encouraging her to share, and each word made him feel more connected to her world. After breakfast, they walked through a nearby park. She ran ahead at first, then turned back to make sure he was following. He watched her, noticing how careful she was not to get too far, yet still allowing herself to enjoy the freedom. When she finally sat down on a bench, he joined her. They sat side by side, talking about everything and nothing. She asked him about his life, curious in the innocent way children are. He answered carefully, leaving out the parts that were too complicated, focusing instead on things she could understand: how he liked to read, the little habits he had, the ways he tried to be kind. At one point, she looked at him with a seriousness that made him pause. "Do you really want to be my mom today?" she asked. There was no playfulness in her voice, just a quiet hope mixed with uncertainty. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said gently, "I do. I want to try my best." Her eyes softened, and a small smile appeared. She leaned against him as they watched the ducks on the pond. And for a few moments, there was no past, no future, just the present. He felt the importance of these moments, the small gestures of listening, of paying attention, of simply being there. He realized that this was what she needed most, and he wanted to give it wholeheartedly. Later, they went to a nearby craft store. She wandered through the aisles, picking up materials for drawing and painting. She explained how much she loved creating things, how it helped her imagine worlds where she felt safe and happy. He watched her hands move as she chose colors and brushes, admiring her focus and creativity. He even picked up a few items himself, asking her which ones she thought would be fun to use. She giggled at his questions, delighted that he was taking it seriously. Back at her art table, they spent hours painting together. She showed him how to mix colors, how to create shapes and patterns. He tried to follow her instructions, and though he wasn't very skilled, she laughed in a way that was full of pure joy. It's not mockery, and that laughter filled him with warmth. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with work or money, but everything to do with making someone else happy. As the day progressed, he noticed small changes in her. She spoke more freely, her laughter came more easily, and the sadness in her eyes seemed lighter. She even held his hand without hesitation, and at one point leaned her head against his shoulder as they painted. He felt a deep protective instinct rise inside him, a desire to keep her safe from the disappointments and loneliness she had experienced before. They took a break to have a picnic in the park. She had packed a small lunch, with the help of the center staff, and they sat on a blanket, eating sandwiches and fruit. She told him stories about her drawings, the characters she imagined, and the little adventures she wished she could have. He asked questions, making her think about possibilities she hadn't considered before. The conversation was light but meaningful, a blend of imagination and connection that deepened their bond. After the picnic, they went for a walk along a quiet path lined with trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground. She skipped ahead occasionally, then turned back to make sure he was following. They talked about hopes, dreams, and even fears. She shared her worries about moving from one foster home to another, about not having a permanent place to belong. He listened, offering comfort and reassurance in the way he knew best. His words simple but honest, and his presence steady. As the afternoon turned to evening, they returned to a small library nearby. She picked out books, some picture books, some early chapter books, and they found a quiet corner to sit and read. He read aloud to her, his voice gentle, careful to bring the stories to life. She listened intently, sometimes asking questions, sometimes pointing out details she liked. He marveled at her curiosity and intelligence, realizing that these moments were helping her feel seen, heard, and valued. The sun began to set, now painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked back toward the community center, their hands intertwined. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with a mix of tiredness and happiness. "I'm glad you're my mom today," she said softly. He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion in her words. "And I'm glad I can be," he replied. "This has been a very special day for me too." Back at the center, the staff smiled as they saw the two of them arrive. They didn't need to ask questions. They could see the bond that had formed over the course of the day. She turned to him, giving him a hug that was warm and sincere. He hugged her back, feeling the importance of that connection, understanding that even a single day could have a lasting impact. As he left the center, he felt a sense of purpose that he had never experienced before. The city around him was busy, noisy, and chaotic, but inside he carried a quiet warmth. He thought about the little girl who had asked for a mom for just one day, and he realized that she had given him something equally precious in return, a reminder of what truly mattered. A lesson in love, patience, and human connection. That night he reflected on the day, the simple moments that had filled it with meaning. He remembered her laughter, the way she had held his hand, the stories she had shared. He understood that these experiences were the foundation of trust, the building blocks of a relationship that could grow over time. He felt a determination rising within him, a desire to continue being part of her life, to offer more than just a single day of care. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, uncertainties, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that the bond they had started to form was worth every effort. For the first time in years, he felt that he was doing something purely good, something that mattered beyond wealth or status, something that touched the heart of another human being in a real and lasting way. And somewhere, in the corner of the community center, a little girl held on to the memory of a day filled with care, laughter, and love. She went to bed that night with a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging, even if just for one day. And he, sitting alone in his apartment, felt a warmth that came from knowing he had made a difference, that he had begun to open his heart to a world he had long ignored. Both of them, in their own ways, had experienced a day that neither would forget, a day that marked the beginning of something far greater than either could have imagined. The next few weeks were a mixture of excitement and quiet reflection for both of them. The man found himself thinking constantly about the little girl, wondering how she was, hoping she was happy, and wishing he could spend more time with her. He realized that her presence had started to change him, bringing a softness to his heart that he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't sure how to describe it, but it was a feeling that made his days brighter and his mind calmer. He looked forward to every opportunity to be around her, and he began to notice things about her that made him admire her even more: her resilience, her curiosity, and the small acts of kindness she showed to others. One morning, he visited the community center earlier than usual, wanting to see her before the day became too busy. When she spotted him, she ran toward him with a wide smile, her backpack bouncing with each step. He knelt down, picking her up briefly in a hug before letting her go. She laughed, the sound pure and carefree. And he felt a warmth spread through him that he couldn't explain. They spent the morning together doing small, ordinary things that felt extraordinary in their simplicity. They baked cookies at a small kitchen set up in the community center. Laughing when the flour dusted their faces or when a cookie didn't turn out perfectly, she showed him how to decorate them with sprinkles and icing, and he followed her instructions as best he could. The joy in her eyes made him forget the pressures of his own life, the meetings, the endless decisions, the loneliness. In that kitchen, there was only the two of them, creating and laughing and simply being. After baking, they went for a walk in a nearby park. The trees were tall and green, and sunlight streamed through the leaves, creating patterns on the path. They played a game of imagination, pretending they were explorers, searching for hidden treasures. She led the way, full of energy and determination, and he followed, matching her enthusiasm as best he could. For the first time in a long while, he felt free to be playful without worrying about appearances or expectations. Her laughter was contagious. And soon, he found himself laughing openly, a deep, hearty sound that surprised even him. During a quiet moment on a bench, she leaned against him and asked about his own childhood. He hesitated, unsure how much to share, but then decided to tell her some small truths. He spoke of a childhood that had been lonely, of parents who were distant, and of the longing he had felt for care and attention. She listened quietly, her hand resting gently on his arm. In that moment, he realized that she understood in a way that went beyond words. She could sense his feelings without needing explanations. It was a connection that surprised him, a bond that deepened with each passing day. As the afternoon approached, he took her to a small craft store she had wanted to visit. She wandered through the aisles, picking up materials for drawing, painting, and small creative projects. She showed him how to choose colors, how to combine textures, and how to let imagination guide the hand. He tried to follow her instructions, feeling clumsy but determined. She giggled at his efforts, but the laughter was warm and encouraging, never mocking. The joy of creating together made the hours pass quickly. And he realized that these simple acts of guidance and support were exactly what she needed. When they returned to the community center, they found a quiet corner to continue their activities. She set up her art supplies and began to draw, and he joined her, attempting sketches of his own. She looked at his work with curiosity, offering gentle suggestions and praise. He noticed how confident and patient she was, guiding him without commanding, teaching without pressure. It was remarkable the way she had learned to be self-sufficient, yet still crave connection. He felt a growing admiration for her strength, a desire to nurture it and protect it. Later, they shared a small meal together, sitting side by side at a table. She talked about her hopes and dreams, the stories she wanted to create, and the adventures she wished she could have. He listened intently, asking questions, and encouraging her to imagine beyond the limitations she had faced. He realized that his role in her life wasn't to solve all her problems or shield her from disappointment, but to provide stability, attention, and care, a consistent presence that could give her confidence to explore the world. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the city, he walked her back to the community center. She hesitated at the door, sensing that their time together was coming to an end. Her eyes looked worried, as if she feared the return of loneliness. He knelt down, taking her hands in his, and said gently, "I know it feels like our time together is short, but I want you to know that I care. I'm not going anywhere for the time I can be with you." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she hugged him tightly. It was a hug that conveyed more than words ever could, a mix of gratitude, trust, and the fragile hope of someone who has learned to protect her heart but still longs for connection. He hugged her back, feeling the weight and warmth of that moment. Understanding that he had begun to make a difference in her life in ways he hadn't imagined, the weeks continued with a rhythm of small, meaningful moments. They read together, played games, created art, and explored the city in tiny adventures that made her feel seen and valued. He learned to anticipate her needs, to understand her moods, to provide comfort without being intrusive. And she, in turn, learned to trust him to share her thoughts and feelings, and to experience joy without fear of it being temporary. However, the man began to notice the reality that lingered beyond these moments. The little girl's foster guardian had informed the staff that she might be moving to another state soon, a decision made by the social system that he could not control. The news unsettled him more than he expected. He realized that he had grown deeply attached to her, that her presence had filled a void he hadn't fully acknowledged. The thought of losing her, of having to return to his solitary life, was unbearable. He spent that night reflecting, pacing in his apartment, thinking about what it meant to care for someone so profoundly, to form a bond that could be disrupted by circumstances beyond their control. He knew he had to act, to find a way to ensure that their connection didn't have to end. He reached out to the staff at the community center, discussing options and possibilities, exploring ways to remain a consistent presence in her life. The little girl, sensing his concern, asked softly, "Are you going to leave me too?" Her voice trembled, carrying the fear that had become familiar to her over the years. He knelt down and held her hands firmly, looking into her eyes. "No," he said with conviction. "I'm not going anywhere. I will do everything I can to be here for you." Her expression softened slightly, a mix of relief and tentative trust. She leaned against him, and he held her close, understanding that this simple act of reassurance was powerful. It was more than a promise. It was a commitment to her emotional safety, a step toward breaking the cycle of abandonment she had known. Over the following days, he began to take more concrete steps. He researched the legal and practical options for becoming more involved in her life, understanding that it would require effort, patience, and perseverance. He realized that this wasn't just about one day or one moment. It was about creating stability, about being a reliable presence she could count on regardless of the uncertainties around her. In the meantime, they continued to spend time together, making the most of each day. He listened to her stories, encouraged her creativity, and allowed her to guide their activities. She showed him how to braid hair, how to make small crafts, and even how to fold paper airplanes. He found joy in these small lessons, learning from her in ways he hadn't expected. Their relationship grew, shifting from a single day of connection to a bond that felt enduring, built on trust, understanding, and genuine care. One evening, as they walked home from the park, she turned to him and said quietly, "I like it when you're with me. It feels safe." He felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the honesty in her words. "I like it too," he replied. "And I want you to feel safe as much as I can help it. Always." The city lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the streets. But in that moment, neither of them noticed the world around them. They were focused on each other, on the connection they had nurtured, on the promise of something lasting. The little girl, who had once only wished for a mom for one day, began to understand that there were people willing to stay, willing to care, willing to be there, and he, who had never imagined being a caregiver or forming such a bond, realized that this experience had transformed him. It had opened his heart, teaching him patience, empathy, and the profound importance of presence. The weeks that followed would continue to test and strengthen that bond. But both of them knew that something meaningful had begun, a connection that neither time or distance could easily erase. The weeks turned into months, and the bond between the man and the little girl grew stronger each day. Their time together was filled with laughter, creativity, and moments of quiet understanding. Every morning, he looked forward to seeing her, to spending hours listening to her stories, helping with her projects, and simply being there. He had discovered a joy he had never known, a satisfaction that came not from wealth or accomplishments, but from the simple act of caring for another human being. He realized that the little girl had changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. She had brought light into a life that had often been consumed by routine and responsibility. She had reminded him of the beauty in small things, the importance of patience, and the joy of genuine connection. In turn, he had become a constant, reassuring presence in her life, someone she could rely on no matter what challenges arose, but reality still loomed over them. The possibility of her moving to another state weighed heavily on both of their minds. He had already begun exploring options to remain in her life, researching legal pathways and speaking to the community center staff. He knew that this would take time, effort, and patience, but he was willing to do whatever it took. He could not imagine letting her go, not after seeing how deeply they had connected. One afternoon, as they sat in a small park surrounded by blooming flowers and the sound of birds, the little girl looked up at him and asked softly, "Do you think we could always be together, even if things change?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question. He knelt down to her level, holding her small hands in his. "I will do everything I can to be with you," he said gently. "I want you to have someone you can always count on. I may not be able to control everything, but I promise I will never give up on you." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of hope rather than sadness. She leaned into him, and he hugged her tightly, feeling the connection deepen even further. He realized that love wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was about showing up, being present, and being consistent. The days continued with their usual activities, baking, reading, drawing, and exploring the city, but each moment was now imbued with a sense of permanence, a sense that their bond could withstand the uncertainties ahead. They laughed more easily, spoke more openly, and shared dreams and fears without hesitation. He found himself learning from her in unexpected ways, discovering resilience, creativity, and optimism he had long forgotten. One evening, he made a decision that had been on his mind for weeks. He contacted the staff at the community center to discuss the possibility of fostering her. It was a complex process, requiring legal approvals and careful consideration, but he felt that he had to try. She had become a part of his life in a way that could not be undone by distance or circumstance. He wanted to offer her not just a day, but a lifetime of care, stability, and love. When he shared this plan with her, she stared at him in disbelief. You want to be my family?" she asked, her voice a mix of hope and fear. She had been hurt by loss before, and the idea of someone committing to her for life was almost too much to believe. "Yes," he said firmly. "You asked for a mom for one day, but how about a family for the rest of your life?" Her small body trembled with emotion, and tears rolled down her cheeks. She threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly, and he held her close, promising himself that he would do everything in his power to protect and care for her. It was a moment of profound connection, the culmination of months of trust, love, and shared experiences. The process of fostering began, and while it was not without its challenges, he approached each step with patience and determination. He attended meetings, completed paperwork, and met with social workers, always keeping her best interests at heart. She watched him navigate the process with admiration and hope, feeling that for the first time in her life, someone was truly committed to her well-being. As the days passed, their home life began to take shape. He made sure she had a comfortable space to call her own, filled with her artwork, books, and personal touches that reflected her personality. They established routines together: morning breakfasts, evening story time, weekend walks, and these small rituals became the foundation of a stable and loving environment. She thrived in this new sense of security, her laughter and energy returning in full force. He also learned how to care for her in ways that were meaningful to her. He learned how she liked her hair done, how she preferred her meals, and how to anticipate her moods. He discovered that being a caregiver was not about controlling or directing, but about listening, observing, and responding with love and understanding. In return, she learned to trust, to express her feelings, and to embrace the safety of having someone who truly cared. One afternoon, as they were sitting together in the living room, she handed him a drawing she had made. It was a picture of the two of them, holding hands, surrounded by bright colors and smiling faces. Above it, she had written, "Home." He looked at the drawing, feeling a surge of emotion. "This is beautiful," he said softly, his voice thick with feeling. "Thank you for sharing this with me." She smiled shyly, proud of her work. "It's us," she said. "It's our home." In that moment, he realized the full significance of their journey. She had asked for a mom for one day, but in that simple request, she'd changed both of their lives. She had shown him the importance of love, presence, and trust, and he had given her the stability and care she had longed for. Together, they had created something lasting, a family built, not on circumstance, but on choice, commitment, and genuine connection. The months that followed were filled with continued growth and happiness. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and small, everyday victories together. She excelled in her studies and her art, encouraged by the consistent support and attention he provided. He, in turn, found a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had never known, discovering that the greatest achievements were not measured by wealth or success, but by the love and care shared between people. And so, the little girl who had once only wished for a mom for one day found a life filled with love, stability, and belonging. The man who had once lived in solitude discovered the profound joy of caring for someone else, of being a constant presence, of forming a family built on trust and heart. Together, they navigated the challenges of life, celebrated its joys, and created memory.